change is disproportionately affecting the mental health and well being of women in Pakistan, particularly in urban settings. This seminar aims to shed light on the intersection of climate change, mental health, and gender, and to explore the unique challenges faced by women in Pakistan. I will be deliberating upon the key objectives of today's seminar. Number one, raise awareness about the mental health impacts of climate change, focusing particularly on climate anxiety and its disproportionate effect on women. Number two, discuss the specific challenges faced by urban women in Pakistan in the context of climate change. Number three, explore and promote strategies for elevating climate anxiety through community engagement, policy reforms, and individual resilience building measures. And finally, advocate for the integration of mental health considerations into climate action plans, ensuring that the psychological well being of women is prioritized. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth and engaging session for everyone. For online participants, please keep your video on and microphone off when not speaking. For our in-person panelists, please ensure that you switch on your microphones before you begin speaking. And number three, the seminar is being live streamed. For questions, this is for our online participants. Please raise your hand or use the Q&A box. And in-person participants, please hold your question until the discussion session. And finally, it's a request that kindly keep your mobile phones on silent mode. So I would now request Ms. Zainab Naeem, Associate Research Fellow, Head of Program on Ecological Sustainability and Circular Economy. She will be presenting the findings on climate anxiety and its impact of women in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Amna. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge our speakers and those of whom have joined us today. So I'll begin with Humaira Jahanzeb. She's the team lead at UN Living Indus Initiative. We have Halima Khan. She's representing not just the Energy Update, FPCCI, and other organizations, but at the moment she's also representing women in energy. Because I believe even now in energy sector, we have very little, representation of women. So thank you so much for being here. We have also been joined by Sidra Riaz. She is a lecturer at Namal University, but also she's a climate activist, and environmental change makers is her initiative. And she has been advocating since floods 2022. Am I right? And online, we have been joined by Ms. Zofine Ibrahim. She is an environmental journalist and has been writing about and being vocal about the issues of, gender-related issues of climate and how communities have been, working towards adaptation mitigation in this in Pakistan and other countries. So thank you for joining us today. Shortly, I believe three of our panelists are stuck in traffic at the moment, but they'll be joining us. So we have Shesha Bangash from Skilistan, and he is also a youth climate activist. He trains youth in different capacity building programs and has a huge network. We have, thank you, Ms. Jaya Jaki. She is here with us. She has joined us. She's a human rights activist and is very vocal about the issues of climate, human rights, and other social issues. So thank you. We will be shortly joined by Mr. Aftab Alam Khan, and he's an independent development consultant and has worked with different development organizations on the issues of climate in communities and community resilience. So I welcome you all again, and thank you so much, Amna, for being the moderator for this event today. So I'll just briefly share about a study that we conducted. The purpose of the seminar was, one of the main objective was to share the findings of the study and also to gather feedback from all of you, apart from some of the questions that we have already shared with some of you and those that we'll be asking today about the climate anxiety. So before the panel, I would like to share the findings of the study. The study was very recently conducted along with two of my colleagues, Huzefa and Hania. Well, Hania was an intern with us, and she has her specialization in psychology, so that's what prompted her to be part of this research. Next, please. Okay, I have the pointer. Thank you. So I'll begin with why this specific topic. And within climate change, there are so many phenomena, but one of the major phenomena is the rising temperature, that is heat waves or heat stress. So this map or the stripes that you see, they indicate the future projections. At 2020, we started to realize that the temperature is highest recorded. And the next years after 2020, 2021 to 22, 23, and every subsequent the following years, they were labeled as the highest temperature ever recorded or the warmest summers ever recorded. So I think in 2100, you can see the color changing to, it's maroon or purple red color, and it indicates that the temperature will be beyond something that human bodies can tolerate. Because as per science, there is a certain degree of temperature, I believe it's 35 degrees Celsius, that the human bodies can tolerate. And beyond that temperature, our enzymes, they start to degenerate, and we start to lose our concentration, and physically we become dehydrated. So this is the stats. Now, why climate anxiety? So we have conducted extensive review on assessing the linkages. The papers were studied from Lancet and other organizations who are working on health related issues, and also some review papers from different academic journals. So it indicates that climate change has led to an increase in heat waves, of course, and flood events. These are two major events that are now occurring on a fast track basis. They are no longer a slow onset event. So they in turn are particularly associated with an increased prevalence of anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, as well as symptoms of depression. Mental health and well-being are interconnected with climate change. This is a very well-established fact now, and it has different pathways and multiple factors through which it is connected. Mental disorders involve significant disturbances in thinking, emotional regulation, or behavior. And anxiety disorders. Now, there are mental disorders, and anxiety is one of the mental disorders that is world's most common mental disorders. And in 2019, it affected almost 301 million people. And I think that was also the year when COVID started to affect the world, late 2019. So women, young people, and people with low socioeconomic status have shown to be more vulnerable to anxiety and mood disorders related to disasters that are especially climate induced. The morbidity of mood disorders, organic mental disorders, schizophrenia, neurotic, and anxiety disorders increase with high outdoor temperatures, and especially during heat waves. So heat is associated with increasing number of psychiatric emergencies and admission to psychiatric hospitals globally. These are global stats. Now, heat stress, it directly caused by heat waves, has been associated with mood disorders, as explained earlier. It is so they are basically, heat wave is a spike of high temperature that lasts some days that range outside the normal temperature for a specific season. So it is, although it occurs at a specific time of the year during specific season, but it can have wide-ranging effects that can last throughout the year on humans. People with mental illness were 3 times more likely to run the risk of death from a heat wave than those without mental illness. And this data has been recorded from Europe, East Asia, America, especially the global north. Then pregnant women exposure to heat wave has been shown to be related to a lower average birth weight and increase of incidence of preterm birth. This is also a manifested reality, I must say. Then percentage of deaths were higher in women than men during the European heat wave that was last year. So during childhood and adulthood comprised reduced schooling and economic activity other than behavioral and motor problems and reduced IQ. So this is all your emotional and psychological well-being plus the physical. Research evidence suggests that there is an approximate 1% increase in suicide incidence for each 1 degree Celsius temperature increase above a local ambient temperature threshold, and an associate 2.2% increase in overall mortality related to either suicide or mental disorders. Last year in Maharashtra, farmers committed suicide because of extreme heat waves. Their crops were damaged, so they committed suicides. In hot temperatures, increase in discomfort leads to increased feelings of hostility and aggressive thoughts and possibly actions. So hotter cities, they are more violent than cooler cities. Why? Because violent crimes occur more during heat waves in cities that have higher temperatures. The increase in heat related violence is greater in hot summers and showed increased rates in hotter years. Higher temperatures than usual, especially, of course, in June, July, they were associated with an outbreak of aggressive crimes and prescription medicines. Now, we have people who, there are people that like to take prescription medicines, like if they are unable to sleep and if they are having any depression, so they take those medicines. But if there's a heat wave, then those medicines will impair other, psychological and physical challenges that the people are already facing. So these medication are not helpful, especially during heat waves. Now, anxiety disorder. Why I'm focusing more on anxiety? Because our study was conducted on this particular disorder. There are so many other mental disorders and emotional issues, but anxiety. So there are several types of anxiety disorders, including generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, and various phobia-related disorders. But for this specific study, we focused on generalized anxiety disorder. And why? Because what are the symptoms of generalized? It is a persistent feeling of anxiety or dread, which can interfere with your daily life. And it is not the same as occasionally worrying about things or experiencing fear, due to any stress. If it can be work related stress, that's normal. People living with generalized anxiety disorder experience frequent anxiety for months, if not years. And its symptoms are you feel restless, wound up or on edge, being easily fatigued, having difficulty concentrating, being irritable, having headaches, unable to sleep, stomach ache without any reason, unexplained body pains, difficulty controlling feelings of worry, having sleep problems such as difficulty falling or staying asleep. So this is generalized. Now, this is taken from Lancet study. These are the determinants of mental health. Now, if we start from the bottom, and they can change depending upon where you're living, right? And what are the conditions? So we have mental health disorder. Some of us, we have pre-existing disorders, and it can be related to our genetics, our age, our gender, ethnicity, or personal issues. Then we have individual psychology and lifestyle factors, emotional responses. Now here is where climate change strikes you. This is at individual level, psychology level, and psychological level, and in lifestyle factors. There's a heat wave, it is going to affect you. Then we have social and community networks, level of collective action that affects your overall climate anxiety challenges. Living and working conditions. If you're living in slums, it's going to be different. If you're living in any place where there are air conditioners, like in this room we have a air conditioner, so we are not feeling the heat and the humidity. So but those who are working, the laborers who are working outside, they are feeling the brunt. So environmental conditions plus your community, your lifestyle, it exacerbates and or aggravates the challenges that you face in context of anxiety and mental health. Climate change. Now, these are basic impacts. Of course, we are experiencing loss and damage of homes, property due to floods, loss of habitat, community breakdown, experiencing extreme high temperatures. Now, definitely these all challenges and all crises, they aggravate mental health of a human. So new cases or increased symptoms of mental disorders are being reported on daily basis. Increased deaths by suicide, increased susceptibility to physical ill health. We are facing different challenges when we are facing climate change, especially in context of our physical health as well. Worsened population mental health and mental and emotional distress is being caused by, and these are very chronic challenges. Now, this is a snapshot of recent impacts that we have faced in Pakistan. If I start from 2002 till 2022, almost 152 extreme weather events, 300% increase in GLOF. You all know, while we are sitting here, there's an emergency, GLOF emergency has been issued for Gilgit-Baltistan region. Highest intensity heat wave persistence has increased to 41 days per year. Summers are becoming longer. Pakistan now has hottest cities in the world, Jacobabad and Dadu. That was reported even last year. Absolute water scarcity predicted by 2025. We are becoming we were water surplus country, and now we are becoming water scarce. Food insecurity rising 40 to 60%. Sea level, of course, along the coast of Karachi and other areas, Thatta, Badin, it's rising. Threefold increase in climate-induced migration from 0.7 million people to 2 million people by 2050 has been projected. And climate-related risk and environmental degradation could reduce Pakistan's GDP by at least 18 to 20% by 2050. And if there's, God forbid, another event like we had in 2022, it's going to impact differently. These are some of the newspaper clippings that I have able to collect over the last 2-3 years. First heat, then floods wipe out farms in Pakistan's chilly capital. Extreme weather event. Experts fear 10% cut in wheat, 30% mango production decline. Heavy rain, hailstorm destroyed wheat worth rupees 23 billion. That happened this year. 8.3 million acres of crops were damaged, and this was probably because of the hailstorm and also the heat waves. Now, objective of the study: to assess linkage between heat wave and considering its impacts on the psychological health and particularly on urban women, to review and identify gaps in Pakistan's existing climate change gender action plan that was launched in 2022 in collaboration with IUCN, and the funding was by the GCF. So that was Pakistan's first gender climate action plan, and to contribute to the to mainstreaming the issue of climate anxiety and mental health as critical indicators in climate action policy and planning with a specific focus on gender. So we conducted a sort of online survey. 26 questions were developed, closed-ended, and 2 were open-ended questions. The survey was circulated by email and even on social media, and 500 responses have been received so far. And this is an ongoing survey that we are going to be conducting for the next 2 months as well. So respondents were from variety of occupation, including medical, public policy, education, social sector. Statistical analysis was conducted, and especially a t-test. It's a test that was utilized to assess difference between physical discomfort in participants, because we had a mix of male and female participants for the survey. And then results were deduced based on the critical analysis that we conducted for the review and for the survey. Now, the first chart, it indicates that the red color indicates that respondents were 65% female and 35% male. The second chart is about their age group. So red is 22.7% were between 30 to 45 years, blue 18 to 30 range, that was 30%. Then 30% was again 30.5% was between 45 to 50 to 60 years, and 60 plus for only 16%. So we had this diversity of age groups. The last pie chart, it indicates their, if their education level, qualification level. We had MPhil, we had mental health professionals, high school students, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. The first chart indicates the employment level, if they were student, unemployed, part-time employed, homemakers, or retired. So we had almost 17.7% unemployed people, and we had almost 8.5% homemakers. And then 10% were basically self-employed, and 51% were employed full-time. The demographic, we had respondents from Karachi, Islamabad, Lahore, Gujranwala, Rawalpindi, Sialkot, Peshawar, and some other cities, including Rahim Yar Khan. So it was a mix of responses that we got. Now, one of the questions was, how often do you use transport to get to work or for education? Because we had students. So why this question? Because, of course, exposure to heat means that they have to go out of their homes. So 83% responded that they daily commute. And rest were if they commuted monthly, or if they don't commute to work, they are working as freelancers or anything. What mode of transport do you use? 68% responded they're using their own cars. And then 15% responded public transport, and 12% responded motorcycle. Rest, for some of them, commuted by walk. Some used university transport because some of them were students, and only a few were those who were using carpooling. That's a very sustainable way of mobility or commute. So these are some of the responses. 38% respondents said that heat almost always significantly impacted their commute, with 70% experienced fatigued, and over 43% experienced psychological symptoms like anxiety, depression, stress, and impaired concentration during heat waves. Then 46% reported experiencing significant discomfort from extreme heat. 66 were very concerned about time, and we also assessed their level of understanding of climate change impacts. And how do they consider this as a psychological issue or a mental health issue? T-test revealed that female experienced 4 times as many heat wave related physical symptoms than male. And male respondents, they did not always say that, they experienced distress or depression or anxiety or anything like that. But females were more of, inclined towards, yes, they did experience. 49% said the heat always negatively affected their work performance. And then 91% read or watched news about climate change regularly, and 58% were confident in their ability to make a positive environmental impact as an individual. So while there is anxiety, there is despair. We also wanted to check how much hopeful they are about changing the overall scenario and climate action. So there was a positive response. Then 87% believed individual action could make a significant difference in addressing climate change. Strategies. Now, we also inquired about what strategies they are using to address the climate anxiety and mental health disorders due to heat wave. 54% they said that we engaged in activities to cope climate anxiety. The most widely used strategy to cope with climate anxiety was talking with friends and family. And yes, and if we are able to discuss, like Sidra, you and I were discussing, so that helped them to cope with the anxiety. And also 32% responded engaging in physical activity. It can be a brisk walk, it can be it can be a stroll in a park in the evening or anything like that. Participating in climate action initiatives. Some of them said that they love to blog about climate change and create awareness, and that sort of, helped them they motivated them to take action. And then some practiced mindfulness, yoga. And then some also said that limiting exposure to climate news was helping them to overcome the anxiety, like shutting off the TV, that no, not all is bad, there are good things also. Then 38% were moderately hopeful about the future of the planet, while the rest had moderate to low hopes. This hopefulness was only around 38%, and 84% prioritized environmental sustainability in their personal goals and decisions, that yes, we must start taking action. And 67% considered addressing climate change as very important to them. We also added the Likert scale, one being least and 5 being highest, how you value or prioritize action. Then climate change gender action plan of Pakistan that was announced in 2022, it did not address climate anxiety or mental health linkages of climate change on women and young girls. There's no mention of it. So this is one of the major gaps. Yes, it is not considered a mental health issue right now. 90% believe that it is significant threat to their personal well-being and believe in the power of individual action. So this is the conclusion. It is also interesting to note that 9.2% mitigate their anxiety by limiting exposure to climate-related news coverage. So I don't know how to project this thing. This indicates passive approach to dealing with climate anxiety. This is a passive approach. Like this is same like kabutar ki tarah aankhein band kar lena. That okay, this is happening, just shut down the TV. No, we are not listening to it. So not able to cope with your anxiety. Then this disconnect may be due to lack of access to mental health resources, community-based support, and practical guidance. Of course, mental health is not something that is very much mainstreamed by media. So that this is one of the issues also. So we have also added some recommendations, launching targeted campaigns. Of course, awareness is something that is need of the hour. It is always needed. Then increasing access to mental health services, including counseling and therapy, specifically designed for women affected by climate anxiety. And then establish women-led community support groups. We have book reading clubs and we have other clubs. So why not a climate anxiety club? To cope with the anxiety. Integrate climate sensitive design into urban planning, such as increasing green spaces, which can mitigate urban heat island effect and provide safe outdoor environments. Then include climate change and mental health education in school curriculums. Encourage and support women participation in decision making and policy making. It's very important because they are the most vulnerable and affected group. Implement workplace policies that protect women from extreme heat exposure, including flexible working hours, especially during heat waves, and also remote work options. And then provide subsidies or insurance coverage for mental health services to make them more affordable for women. Ensure that mental health considerations, particularly for women, are integrated into existing plans, which is not at the moment. And enforce a legal framework requiring cities to have heat action plans, because this is something that is being faced by entire Pakistan. And also provision for women's mental health awareness, collaboration and partnership, role of private sector, CSOs and communities, it can never be neglected. So I'm sorry for the longish presentation, but the study was very much close to my heart because I'm also somebody who gets affected because of heat waves, and who gets depressed, and who faces anxiety whenever I have to commute 45 minutes daily to work, and especially if there's heat wave. So it affects me. So that's why the study was conducted. It was not part of any project. This is something that SDPI has taken as an initiative. So, and for this, we would definitely, I'll hand over to Amna, but Amna, before asking the questions, we'd also request your feedback, and then later on the other participants' feedback on the study and how we can improve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zainab. You have rightly pointed out the recommendation model of launch, increase, establish, integrate, and include. Before we begin with the panel questions, I would invite our panelists to briefly share their feedback on the study findings presented by Ms. Zainab. This will help frame our discussion and connect the study's insight with the broader conversation. I would request Ms. Humaira Jahanzeb to share her insights.
Thank you so much, Amna, and thank you, Zainab, for this excellent presentation. I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate SDPI for, working on this very important study, and then also having everyone over here to, inform everyone on this very important subject. It's very interesting. I just had one question on when you said that these respondents, they're from the urban setups across Pakistan. Okay, very interesting and useful findings. And I think the recommendations are also very useful. It would have been excellent if somebody from the government was also present in this gathering, because some of the policy recommendations, especially the great work that you mentioned on the gender action plan, but the challenge that it lacks the linkage with mental health should also be brought up with the concerned departments and the ministries and all, to sort of inform them of this very pertinent issue, and then ensuring that it is followed through as well. So I think that is one of the important points. And this, we cannot ignore the impacts that climate change or heat stress is having on people within our communities, whether they are rural or urban setups. Because I was recently going through one of the articles and studies that UNICEF has done, and it speaks about, child brides and how the recent monsoons have actually given an increase in the number of child brides. And actually, we call them child brides, but they're actually, unfortunately, young girls who are given in exchange for money. Because of the impacts of climate change, of heat waves, of floods, of monsoons, which our people are not able to cope with. And, all of this is basically connected. So whether it is food security, food insecurity, whether it is economic opportunities, employment opportunities, all of this is very much integrated, and it's affecting everyone. So I think a very important part of this would be to engage the policymakers, people from the government, the civil society, and of course the communities themselves, the general population, to raise awareness, knowledge, to inform them of this important matter, and then to follow through on the recommendations. I'll give a chance to others to speak, and then we can come back on the living Indus and all of that. Yeah, thank you.
I would request Ms. Zofeen Ibrahim if she has some input.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me, Zainab. And Zainab, I was just thinking, you're talking about this survey, which was apparently an online one. So, in Karachi, there's like over 60% people living in informal settlements. And a lot of the women that I meet in informal settlements do not even have access to the internet. They're not that educated. So I don't know if, their input has been taken and how their lives have been affected by climate-induced disasters. I already know how much stress there is in their life. I do not know, I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, so I cannot gauge that anxiety or stress that you're talking about, but I can very well feel it. So I wonder if that important aspect can also be included. You said this is an ongoing exercise, so perhaps, this could be expanded to include informal settlements. If it is a countrywide survey, then it would be very good to include Karachi, especially because, you would have, you'd have a better understanding of how things are in these informal settlements. I wanted to say that, we keep talking about women as agents of change. Our policymakers talk about this. They use this terminology so much. And interestingly, you just said that in this climate action plan, they have included gender, but they have probably not thought of including the mental health aspect of it. And I'm not surprised at all, because even till the last COP28, where there were, I think about, if I'm not mistaken, there were about 200 health-related sessions. Only 10 were dedicated to the mental health issue. So this is a start, and I'm happy that you people are doing it. And I can talk about what we as media are doing maybe later. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sophine. You have rightly pointed out that informal settlements need to be included in the survey. I would now request Ms. Halima Khan, Head of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Energy Update, to please kindly share her insights regarding the study.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, SDPI, for having me here and representing Women in Energy and Energy Update. Well, I think Humaira has rightly pointed out all the concerns that we need to have some awareness. We need to have all these issues related to climate action. And I think this gender sensitivity in urban planning is a very important issue that needs to be raised, and that needs to be discussed with the government authorities, that needs to be included in the policy. And while having these policy discussions, I think we should have this gender exclusivity of women there. And I think we'll discuss these things later on, but more or less the study was very, very important and very well recommended things. One thing I would like to point out, as Zainab said, that वो कबूतर सामने देख के आंखें बंद करने वाली जो एग्जाम्पल थी, तो उसके अंदर yes, this happens. This is very important factor, because what happens these days is जहाँ पे भी हमारी political involvement हो रही होती है, वहाँ पे we also do the same thing, कि हम TV off कर देते हैं, हम social media अपना बंद कर देते हैं, that we do not need this kind of stress in our lives. But yes, we have to work on it. So I think we'll discuss further things later. So this was it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would now request Mr. Aftab Alam Khan, International Development Consultant, to share his insights.
Thank you very much, SDPI, for yet another very important study. And I think it is rightly titled as Silent Crisis. And I agree with most of the panelists with their points. And I think it would be very useful in the next stage to develop a strata of sampling. Before coming here or yesterday, I spoke to 4 women, one from upper middle class, one from lower middle class, and 2 housemaids. And they had different issues that they shared. For example, the one with upper middle class shared that the cooking was, which takes a lot of time of women, was a major problem during heat waves, because they're already in the hot pot, yet the temperature is rising up to 45 degrees or so. So I think these are the different concerns. There are similarities as well. When I spoke to a lower middle class woman, and she said that when I go for work, during heavy rain, it is very difficult to go for work. The roads are not good. The pathways are bad. Sometimes they fell off the bikes, and they have heavy load of work due to the cleaning after the rains. Similarly, when I spoke to housemates, they told us that going to work, because they go by foot, is a major issue, and they do not wash faces when they go to a new house for work, because that is not the norm. They do drink water, which helps, but they do not wash face. And I think there is a role of us as well as development practitioners and also residents, how we can contribute to that. And I think it's very important to include the slums people, because according to statistics, around 35% of people in Pakistan in slum areas, they live in one room with an average family size of 5 to 7 people. Imagine in the heat wave of 40s or over 40, how difficult it is to survive. And then water is very important. Studies show that it's very important to take water during heat waves. But unfortunately, 50% of the people of Pakistan are deprived of clean water. And majority of them in cities as well. So I think it's very important to bring in those aspects as well. And I would like to add a little bit more that the climate change events do not see men or women differently, but the gender roles that we have in our society and the gender inequalities that we have, they basically impact disproportionately on women. For example, I would like to share 4 issues which are not an issue for men in general. For example, I always call it non-issue for men is the biggest issue for women. For example, after any disaster, toilet is not an issue for men, but toilet is the most important issue for women. Researches show that food has been categorized at the top requirement after every disaster, but not for women. Women have categorized toilet as top before even the food for their topmost requirement after a disaster. I know women, when I spoke to a woman after 2022 flood, and she said that my mental stress is the toilet. And when I asked the details, that she said that we have no toilet, there is a camp, and we only have a place behind the tent. And we have to wait the whole day when the sun sets, and we also keep eye on when men are not there. So imagine if our toilets are locked in Islamabad, what situation we would face. So I think that creates a huge mental stress. Other issues, for example, pregnancy. Researchers in Pakistan and internationally have shown that heat waves are linked with premature deliveries. And this is more issue for women who do manual work. And I'm sure people know that the delivery stage is the most stressful time for women as well. So I think these climate change is exacerbating those points. Other issues, for example, harassment is not that big an issue for men, but this is the biggest issue after disaster for women and girls. Similarly, I've talked about cooking already and other issues. So I think it's very important to have that diversified aspect, and I hope the next level would include them. Many of these points are already addressed in the research, so congratulations to the team. But I think the most important thing is how to include these aspects in policies, which are not there as yet, as you have mentioned. And also, researchers in different countries have shown the single most important thing is to engage women, not only from us sitting here, but those who are the greatest victim, whether in slum areas or low, engage them in research and also finding solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have rightly pointed out the micro-analysis of the post-climate-induced events. I would now request Ms. Sidra Riaz. She represents academia to present her viewpoint over this study.
Thank you so much, Amna. First of all, I would like to congratulate Zainab for conducting such a brilliant study, for the fact that since this is not funded by any project and it is done by you and your interns. My input on it would come from someone who belongs to an academia and who is doing a PhD. My input would be on the methodology of this research, how it could be better improved if you would like to make a model for the South Asian context. Because while coming here and also working as a lecturer and someone who is working on climate activism, I always see whenever we open Google and search any topic, all the narratives are coming from the global north side. There are very limited number of studies which are done in the South Asian context. So this is first achievement that we are doing a study in Pakistan, which is covering all the aspects of South Asian context. You could broaden this study by doing a comparative analysis of different cities. And for example, the realities in Islamabad would not be similar in the realities women are facing in Peshawar or Karachi, like the way Sophia was also suggesting, having women who are living in those areas who have no internet connectivity. So this sort of a comparative study in different cities. Also, as we are talking about, there is no discussion on climate anxiety in the gender climate action. Through this study, if you broaden this study, you could also come up with a model which can be inculcated in further, and you could share it with different governments as well. You could create a climate anxiety model in a South Asian context. And for doing that, I think you will have to clearly define the variables of the study. Since this is a quantitative study, as I supervise a lot of academic research, if you define the variables and come up with a questionnaire which has already been tested somewhere, in a South Asian context, I would say again, we should not be bringing a questionnaire which was tested in UK and applied that directly in Pakistan. But that questionnaire could be we could adapt that instead of adopting it in Pakistan context. And because I'm sure the questionnaire you circulated, you would have done the validity study, I'm sure. But still, if there is this questionnaire which was already circulated somewhere and you could adopt it, my last suggestion would be every study should have a very strong theoretical background and theories which are supporting it. Because I heard in the beginning, the student who was doing this belongs to a psychology. Is that person is in the room? Yeah. So if she is from the psychology background, she must know about a lot of theories which could support this study. That would help you to publish it in good international journals and also come up with the South Asian context model on climate anxiety. And that would be the biggest contribution from you and your team for Pakistan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sidra. That's why we always say that academia is very important in any type of research-related activity. Thank you for your inputs. I would now request Mr. Shersha Khan Bangash, founder Skillistan, to please give his kind input.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to you, Zainab, and the whole team for taking this initiative. I did think about it in my own ways too, and trying to do something for it. One of the contribution that we did was in COP28, me along with some fellow climate advocates from Morocco, one was from Morocco and some other countries. We did propose a policy on climate and health nexus along with the UAE government officials. I don't know what they did onwards on it, but I'll share that policy paper with you as well. So some of the recommendations in it were creating a helpline for climate induced health anxieties. And this helpline could be on the national level. Apart from that, yes, we also proposed, because it was the first time that a health day was there in COP. So we proposed that this should be designated as World Climate Health Nexus Day, so that this issue could be highlighted. And also we suggested, just like someone shared, that only 10 of the events were mental health, the other were physical health related. So we also focused on more mental health. I definitely agree that women have more mental health because also they're biologically weaker, right? So they're going to be affected more. But men's mental health is also pretty much underrated, right? That is also one thing. And some other things that I would like to include over here and know all this climate stakeholders. One of the things that I did as being the ELCOIC country contact point was that making women the provincial ELCOI leads. And one of your finding also supported it, that it kind of reduces the climate anxiety if you put women in those roles, right? And I think it is going to help. It's creating an impact, because if they see a few women leading the climate debate, other girls, young girls, are also going to follow that. Secondly, when we're talking about climate justice, we should also talk about gender justice, and this study supports that thing. Next thing that I really wanted to share was it's a silent crisis, I mean, in public, right? But it's not such a silent crisis at home. The men would be better able to tell you that when women face these issues, it's not such a silent crisis at home. And last but not the least, I would like to include this, that we should work more as collaborators, as partners in the climate debate, to have more and more women being trained as climate activists and advocates, because when they would go to other women, especially ma'am talked about the slum areas, so they would be able to better grasp their feelings and their suggestions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your input. I would now request Ms. Jaya Jaggi, human rights activist, to present her point of view over this.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me over here. A lot had already been said, but first of all, let me admit, after looking at the stats shared, I'm genuinely feeling quite anxious. And I was just literally realized that I'm shaking because the numbers were really alarming for me, since I'm a human rights activist. For me, even if it says one person was dead, it will be equally valuable to me to look into the depths rather than waiting for, okay, until unless we get this number 1 is equal to thousands, only then the government or maybe the other stakeholders will intervene. But for the moment, keeping this anxiety aside and congratulating the entire team of STPI, taking lead on such study and maybe reinforcing what she had already mentioned, that while I was exploring the intersectionality of climate security and displacement and migrants, I realized that we hardly have on-ground data. I literally had to go through a lot of literature, and I really wanted to, but that was not coming from Pakistan. We hardly have indigenous, native, local research, and probably this gives us an opportunity to see how our own country, research that comes from our own people. Most of the time, even when we see various researches that are done on the Pakistan on or for these people, they are still led by people who are sitting in Harvard maybe, or do not come directly from, or are not native or indigenous. So that's one of the achievements, I would say. Secondly, the numbers that were shared probably would help us to go forward in upcoming years, how we want to design not only the policies that are incoming, but also to design community initiatives. Two important things, though they have already been mentioned, but while I was looking into it, I realized that since I work with rural women a lot, I was wondering if their voices are there, because if it's only based on digital access, let me mention that we do not have digital access all the time. Even not everyone in my family would, even if they have internet, sitting in Islamabad, would not use it, would not access it. Also, a lot of young people probably who have internet access cannot fill this Google form and can answer these probably. And a lot of women, if we go towards rural settings, they do not have internet, they do not have mobiles, they do not have access to Facebook and Gmail. They probably would be of my age, but since because of this gender disparity that we have, they are not granted access to these digital medias, and how we are going to manage it. And also, probably we always use this term climate change, and I understand it, but then it brings a lot of other vulnerabilities and a lot of other issues that probably a few of them were mentioned by Sir as well. So if we also cater that it's not only that just because of its heat wave, but what heat wave causes, and then what are the impacts in my life, considering the infrastructure in Pakistan is not supportive. Since I think eco-anxiety, for example, we are also working around exploring intersectionality of how cultural identities are lost during climate crisis, and how, since we keep these identities quite closer to us, how we become really anxious and it takes a toll on our mental health. And just to mention that we did a few dialogues with young students who were from environmental sciences, and none of them were really aware of it. And I realized it is a really emerging field in today's world. So maybe, and not maybe, but certainly this particular study would aid these emerging fields, making a building block or a foundation for way forward, not only for civil society, academia, but all the stakeholders. Just a quick mention, I don't want to be brutally honest over here, but still I have to. We were talking about toilets, and we had, like sir mentioned, about disasters. I really want to keep this disasters aside for a second. It's still an important issue in Pakistan. I travel in Islamabad. I'll not drink water throughout the day because I know that we do not have public washrooms, and we will not get public washrooms for women in Pakistan until unless it is an issue for men. Until unless this will become an issue for men. So maybe every time I was wondering that we are putting this disaster terminology with it, but since we are into this conversation, but even if we remove that, it's still a big issue for all those women. For example, child early and forced marriages. It's still a big issue despite having legal documents for us or legalities, having frameworks with it. So all those issues that were still there in Pakistan at such a bigger level, and when we put climate crisis into it, probably it quadruples. I would not say it would become double-fold. Also, I think this is important just to take it as a space that when we are talking about women's rights, we're talking about gender. Maybe in our conversation later we can add, as per NEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, around all the national action plans that have been shared with us, hardly 29% of them talk about gender responsive or gender transformative policies or mention about gender. And particularly in Pakistan, that is highly patriarchal. I was just wondering, even if I do not have to talk or think about climate crisis, everything still falls true. In 2022, when there were floods, I had to go for humanitarian relief work, and there were few men in my team leading those efforts. And I said, there are floods, I need to go for the humanitarian relief effort. And they said, Jia, we do not have infrastructure for you. So only men would go. You'll not go. I wanted to go being an activist, but I was not taken by them because they were of the view, we can stay there all night under the sky, where would you stay? And luckily I had to go. So I called a friend of mine and we booked a cab. We went there for a week through our own, obviously, resources. I met a lot of women, and one of the women who was just standing over there, and I asked her, I don't know how insensitive I was, but I asked her, how are you? And she just said, how could I be? And I realized, how could I even ask such a question from someone? She was crying over there. She was pregnant, had one child in her hands and one toddler was there aside her. And she said that I have to wait for the entire day to go to the washroom. We go to this particular mosque and I only be able to go to the washroom in this mosque only at night. Also, she said, how would you feel if you have to stay outside? Because obviously there were water on both of the sides and there was just one road where they had the shelters and they were living inside. And she said, could you even imagine living inside this? आपको हर वक्त रात को ये डर होता है कि आप सेफ भी हैं खातून होने के नाते कि आप यहाँ सो सकती हैं. आप दिन के टाइम में इमेजिन कर सकते हैं. And I think जितनी देर तक वो क्लाइमेट डिजास्टर में आप उस रिहैबिलिटेशन तक नहीं जाते, आप उस जगह पे पहुंचे हैं, आप being a woman, if you just imagine, you cannot sleep at night. A few days back, we might have heard of a rape incident. I was not in my home at that time. मैंने सिर्फ वो न्यूज़ में सुना and I was in a hotel. You have no idea. मैंने 3 दफा उठ के अपने कमरे की कुंडियां चेक की हैं. So the women who are there, even with their families, in those spaces. Also, maybe when we are in this discussion, if we can be a little more mindful of the words we use, particularly when we are talking about women and gender. Just a request for everyone. For example, women are not vocal in the houses about their mental health issues. Like when I was looking into it, I was wondering, mental health is still a taboo, or probably a taboo, or maybe for someone who have access. In Pakistan, we hardly have, like we had around 0.19%, not even one for 1 lakh people psychiatrists. So, 1 lakh people who are suffering, we do not have one psychiatrist for those people. And these services, even if I am not feeling well, I probably cannot afford these services. Also, where are these services? Where are those service providers that are really empathetic, that are really kind, that can ensure privacy? So also, since there are a lot of intersectional complex issues that are connected to it, but maybe when we are into these spaces, we can be more mindful with our words that I do believe women are not vocal into their houses. You might know your sister, mother, or any other women, even at workplace, might be menstruating and having an anxiety just because she has to sit on a white chair. And she might be thinking, oh, I don't want any stain on this chair since I'm in a meeting. So I think these are little things that we could adapt in our own conversations, attitudes, and keep these stereotypes and biases aside, at least when we are in these spaces. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jaya and everyone. Just a collective response regarding the study, and then Amna, I'll hand it over to you. So first of all, it's a learning experience for me as well. Learning your field experience. I mean, learning from you because you have been there. Learning from Aftab Sab and the rest of you. Shersha and everyone. So I think thank you so much for highlighting. And Zofine, I think your point around informal settlements, that's definitely something that I would like to include. I believe you were part of the consultation we conducted on urban climate resilience where informal settlements. I think it was conducted last year where we had included, something around informal settlements and how they need to be made part of it. But for this particular survey, the idea was around to initiate a debate first, because this is something that's not mainstream, and this is something around which gathering data was quite a challenge for us. That was a motivation to initiate a debate, and because we were reviewing the gender action plan of climate change gender action plan, so this is something that was totally missing. There was not a mention about it, even in the part of the strategies or a forward-looking approach that they have mentioned in the plan. So that was something that increased the curiosity to initiate the study. Secondly, why we made it digital? So because it was, of course, it was conducted by my research team and the interns because of their interest. So in the review portion, we have included the indicators, and especially taking the benchmarks from the Lancet Institute. They have developed these benchmarks for the climate anxiety, and they have really good benchmarks. I've also shown some of those benchmarks in my presentation slides. So based on those benchmarks, we have created this, climate anxiety as one of the common benchmarks. And how and why? Because this is anxiety is something that is basically understood by women. If we talk about PTSD, if we talk about other mental health disorders, not everyone is aware of it. And third part, the focus was more on urban women. And because initially we wanted to see, because most of them are working, and of course you are definitely absolutely correct, we need to conduct a comparison with rural women, but this is a starting point, and your suggestion is very well taken, and we'll be adding Zofine and your points, and then Sidra yours also in context of setting up variables, because initially we have conducted a t-test, a statistical analysis to assess the impacts on men and women of climate heat anxiety, the basic data. But as a way forward, we'll definitely be adding that comparative analysis and benchmarking with other countries. The issue is we have data available, as you mentioned, from the global north only. There's no data on climate anxiety as a mental health issue from global south. None. I couldn't find a single publication, not even my research team, indicating that what is the issue. There was only 2 to 3 publications assessing that suicides were conducted because farmers they lost their crops because of the heat wave, so they did suicide and they committed suicide. So that was the only thing that I found from India, Maharashtra, and some studies from Pakistan also, but nothing as how it is affecting women. So that's why this is a sort of a benchmark itself. That's why we initiated this. And also, Aftab Sab, your suggestion regarding the strata, I think that's very good suggestion. Middle class, lower middle class, and then also the urban poor. Taking the point of Zofine also from the slum areas. So yes, as a way forward, we'll definitely like to include that. And another important thing why urban women was the focus, because as I mentioned, this is a non-funded study that we conducted. So it was easier for us to go with the urban women. When we are going with the rural women, it's going to give us very different and also good results. Good in the sense that we'll be able to gather more data, but their challenges are way more different than the urban women challenges. So this is a starting point that we have taken, and Of course, after your suggestions, we'll be again getting in touch with all of you for your input, and the study will be shared for your review also, and so that you can add your points in it, and so we can continue with the with this debate. And the recommendations, Humera, you mentioned, unfortunately, because of the busy schedule of the ministry, we couldn't invite them over today. So, but they have asked us to share the recommendations that we are gathering, especially in context of Gender Climate Action Plan, that we'll be sharing with them. So thank you so much. Over to you, Amna, and also Dr. Shafkat Munir. Thank you so much for being here. He's the Deputy Executive Director, SDPI. And just to give I hope you've gotten an idea of around what was the discussion. So we are having a short panel discussion about this issue, and then I request you to summarize, because you're an expert in this field at SDPI after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. First of all, I would like to thank Zainab and team for putting up this study. And of course, with the limitation of resources and time as well. It's not only resources, limited time. It was required, and certainly it will be contributing to Gender Action Plan of the ministry and other wider issues. Thank you for that. I would like to thank the panelists, Zofin from Karachi and all of you from here. Thank you very much for your time and your valuable input. I think when we talk about the climate anxiety and talking about, especially in the context of women, my understanding and study and experience is that women suffer twice the anxiety. One, the anxiety she faces herself. Secondly, if somebody in the family faces the anxiety because of climate change, again the woman is sufferer. So there's a double trauma for women in a society like Pakistan. So that's why this study is too important. And we hope that once with your ideas which you have given, certainly they are very good ideas and relevant thing. Zainab has already noted and summarized it, and will be incorporating these ideas, and this study will further be improved. And this study basically is providing about data about the urban anxieties, women living in urban areas. Aftab and others also mentioned about the urban areas and the communities where people are really suffering, where even the gender equality is not a concept. In urban areas, somehow, the anxieties are shared between men and women in families. But look at the society where the women has no say. In the urban areas, in particularly the local area where the disaster hits at all the time. So that's why it will provide us at least a leverage, will certainly give some point to the government and for the policy, and also set a benchmark so that we can do further down the line the study with the village women. And then it can have a kind of a recommendation for resilience building efforts, which we putting together. I think it's a closing time, so I will not summarize all, but the understanding is that we all are in this boat and we have to sail it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shafkat. We will now proceed with our panel discussion. I kindly request each panelist to limit their responses, ensuring that we can hear from everyone and maintain a timely discussion. I will be now directing questions to our esteemed panelists based on their expertise. Firstly, I would request Ms. Humera Jahanzeb, team lead at Living Indus, to tell us, with the Living Indus initiative aiming to restore and protect the Indus Basin, how is the component of climate anxiety being addressed within this initiative? Specifically, what efforts are being made to alleviate the mental health burden on urban communities, particularly targeting women who may feel overwhelmed by the impacts of climate change?
Thank you very much, Amna, for this question. So yeah, very delighted to hear all the views of the different people who spoke. Now, speaking of the Living Indus initiative, Zainab is very well aware, and so are the others in the room. It is an overarching initiative, one of those frameworks of the government of Pakistan that addresses the triple planetary crisis. And when we say that, that means addressing the issues of pollution, biodiversity, and climate change. So by virtue of being one of those key frameworks of the, the government and the United Nations system in Pakistan, it inherently, would include the issues of women, of climate change impact on women, and then addressing all of those issues through the interventions that we have under the Living Indus program that fall across 11 key sectors, including livelihoods, food security, irrigation, pollution, etc. We'd be addressing a lot of challenges. So per se, I would say that this is a framework. It's an overarching framework. It has a number of interventions under it that address various issues related to climate change, and the beneficiaries of it are all of the society, men, women, children. And I'd also like to mention here that when this was culminated, it included thorough consultations with all key stakeholders, with the government, with the civil society, development partners, and most of all with the communities across Pakistan. So it is basically a program that is based on the voices of people. So that is how it has been programmed. And now if I speak a little on the implementation, we have some ongoing projects. And within those, of course, we ensure that gender is mainstreamed across these programs, which is to say that women and men, are both included in the program as being envisioned as the final beneficiaries and affectees. But if we speak about awareness raising, workshops, that is also a part of the Living Indus program. So any project that we're looking at includes capacity building, awareness raising workshops, etc., knowledge building. So all of that is a part of the Living Indus program. And we're also looking at public awareness campaigns to educate people on climate change and its impacts. So that's one point of the awareness raising and knowledge building, the open spaces for discussions, and then aiming to develop connections with mental health resources in some of the projects within the Living Indus. And then, of course, there's the green spaces issues. So let's say if we're looking to, have any agreement with the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, for example. So we would be advising the government on, shifting from gray concrete to green infrastructure. Under the Living Indus, we're talking to those entities that are working on natural ecosystems, green infrastructure, etc. So that also then contributes, to the objectives that we're talking about. And then, Zainab, I'd like that you share this with me. We have a very elaborate communication strategy for the Indus program. And I would also like to include this aspect into it. So I'd be sharing it with my team, and then we can have, targeted communication for this particular issue. And then we have, some projects in Islamabad, but also some at the provincial levels. For example, a GCF that looks at the Sindh province and particularly looks at flood protection, mangrove restorations, wetland restorations. So in all of that, women are an extremely important part of those projects, because if you talk about mangroves, I can share with you some very good reports on how women need to be engaged on all of this work and how they suffer because of the issues that they face out of climate change and directly affecting these natural ecosystems. We're working with the rural support programs, the NRSPs. So directly we're working with communities through the Living Indus program. And then if we talk about the waste management project itself, we're aiming to work with SMEs. So within that also we can, incorporate all of this work. And then, this community-based health and first aid that we're also looking to incorporate into some of the projects that we're doing. For example, if there's a project in Tharparkar, Sindh, which looks at, water aspect or solar pumps, let's say, that are being used to sort of take the load away from women, because it's the women who are actually carrying that water. They're walking long distances. It is their children that get affected, their maternal health. We all know what happened in the floods. We were a part of the PDNA, the post-disaster report that was produced, and we had about 650,000 women who suffered, in terms of maternal issues. So yeah, the Living Indus, it is gender and women issues are across the program, but I'm also having discussions right now on having specifically, targeted programs within the Living Indus. We'll have projects for women, and Zainab, you can, give us your ideas on how we can specifically work on this particular aspect, because we do talk to the UN agencies through our platform. So I'd be very happy to support any help that we can give with, continuing this effort that SDPI has started. Thank you.
Thank you so much for enlightening us about the implementation programs that are already under this project. I would now request Ms. Zofine Ibrahim. I would like to ask you that mental stress is increasingly being recognized as a form of non-economic loss and damage in the climate crisis. However, it is rarely projected in the media, especially when it comes to its impact on women. Why do you think this is, and what role can the media play in amplifying the conversation around this part of the climate narrative, particularly for women in urban settings?
Thank you, Amna. Amna, this is a very important question. And in my defense, or in the defense of my fraternity, I would say that if policymakers, if healthcare workers are not aware of this issue, we are just echoing what is happening in society. And even we, as we are part of the society. So even if we are not aware, how can we write about it? So I think it is everyone's job to make this particular issue, more visible. It's but obviously we are the ones who need to take this forward, and I think that we're not able to connect the dots. We're not able to make a link between mental health or eco-anxiety with climate change as yet, because as it is, there are so many stresses, and since people are not aware of what they are going through, they themselves are not aware of what they're going through. So this becomes like we are talking in vacuum. However, I'm very happy that that today this has happened. Zainab and her team have come up with a report, a very preliminary report and study. So we are making slow progress. It is slow, but it is, at least we're talking about it. Now, if you say that we're not writing about it, I think I would disagree here. For my part, I have been writing. Maybe again, may not have connected it to climate change as such, because there are so many other issues that are interconnected with climate change. So, for example, if you're talking about heat waves, and now we know that heat waves are related to climate, is a climate-induced disaster. But people are talking about it from way before they were, hit by the heat wave. And again, I'll take the example of informal settlements, because since this topic is about urban areas, people for years have been telling us that they live in very, very crowded. And I've seen these places because this is where a lot of my stories generate, from the urban slums, where, you talk to a woman and she'll tell you that bhatti hai mera kitchen, which is like a furnace. My kitchen is a furnace, but I have to cook. There is no electricity for 12 hours. Even today, they suffer from huge power outages, but the cooking has to be done even with turning on the mobile phone. Then they say that, look, Bibi, men can go out if there is no bijli, but we have to still stick in the household because we're not allowed to go anywhere. Simple thing as they'll say that men can go out in vests and shorts and get a breath of fresh air. We cannot leave the house without a chadar. They say the chadar is so stifling, we don't want to wear it, but our men folk don't allow us to go out of the house without it. You know, these are the real lived experiences that they will tell you. They are vocal about it. It's not that they're not vocal about it, but vocal doesn't mean that they are listened to. You know, whether it is a village, whether it is a city, whether it is an urban slum, women have the same responsibilities. Women are supposed to perform in a certain manner. It's men's attitudes that haven't changed. It can be, you know, an elite household. It can be where the woman is also working. It can be a slum where the woman is working and so is her husband. It can be a village where both of them are working. But the men's attitudes need changing. And I think that is where, till that happens, most women you talk to and you ask them what they want to be in their next life, they say, I want to be a man in the next life, because it's just too burdensome to be a woman in Pakistan. What else can I tell you? Yes, so when there is a climate disaster, we've talked about it, and many of you have mentioned it already, that we already know the inequalities and the inequities that exist in our society, but they exacerbate many-fold, not just double-fold, as somebody said, but many-fold when disaster strikes. Right now, I know that there's a study going on how heat wave is affecting pregnant women, the preterm deaths and the low weight births that are happening. But so, you know, there is a study going on, but has anybody thought of also taking the mental toll it is taking on a mother who has to then deal with either mortality or morbidity of not just herself, but the child, the newborn child. So I think these are the things that, you know, that are of concern, that worry me, that make me angry also at times. And, you know, when people talk about incorporating gender in policies, I understand, you know, Pakistan and the policymakers in Pakistan, they do a swell job of that. You know, they come up with एक last में एक para डाल देते हैं, that so to make it kosher, that gender डाल दिया है. But you know, unless you do a gender analysis, and unless you find out what the inequalities are, not by sitting in offices, but asking the people who are the most affected, okay, what are the gender equalities that they suffer from? You know, this Khana Puri is not going to take us anywhere. And I also feel that we will be left behind, really, if we do not take our half the population along. We will definitely be left behind. So we need to think seriously about our women folk. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sophine. You have rightly pointed out that it is more related to the attitude of the other gender around the 50% of the population. That's how supporting roles work in any kind of situation. I would now request Ms. Halima Khan to kindly brief us about how climate anxiety is affecting people in urban areas, especially women who are already navigating multiple stressors in their lives. How do you see the role of energy transitions and sustainable energy practices in alleviating climate anxiety among urban women?
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And this is a very important question, and I would like to distribute this question in two halves. First of all, talking about the gender inequalities and all these things related to energy transition, that will be a little dry talk, but still, we have to address this thing. because investing in the renewable energy sources and improving the energy efficiency is a really important discussion at this point, because everyone is talking about the heat waves, everyone is talking about the other issues related to women they are facing with the climate anxiety. We are not talking about the greenhouse emissions. We are not talking about the carbon credits. We are not talking about these technical issues that we are facing on energies aspect. Additionally, I would say that this transition would definitely involve in the significance of the job losses at the stage where women are like the urban women are working, and this is definitely going to affect their employment, and the impact of gender transition on climate anxiety also depend on the changes that are implemented, whether they are accompanied by the supporting policies, whether they are accompanied in the decision making, or they are highlighted anywhere or not. There was a study in 2019 from the Joint Research Center that there is 32% of the women accounted in the workforce all over the workforce in the energy sector, which is a very disturbing and alarming number. 32% is like nothing globally. But when we talk about the gender inclusivity in the policy discussions and energy transition, just to give a brief example, that like a few weeks back, talking in the energy sector, because that will be a very personal example, but still, I was being rejected for one of the posts because I am a woman, not because I had a low profile or something, but only because I'm a woman, and I would be unable to handle the pressures that will be coming on the way from the power sector, and that was very important position. And they said, it's only because you're a woman. I said, I'm happy that I'm a woman. But that was a very, very sad thing that I shouldn't be mentioning here. I shouldn't be mentioning this thing because this is the climate, not only regarding the weather, it's also the environment, and it's about the climate around us. We all women sitting here, somehow we dealing with these situations every day. Why I'm focusing on this gender inclusivity at the policy level, because the political and managerial posts are very important. And at the decision-making stage, if we are having women in their decision-making, that is going to improve the infrastructure overall. First thing. Second, strengthening the community networks. That is definitely women. कहते हैं कि जहाँ पे खवातीन बैठी हो तो खामोशी नहीं रहती है, गुफ्तगू होती रहती है. So उसमें ये है कि women जो है network develop करती हैं, and they keep on like you sit in a place, और उसके बाद जो है आपकी एक अच्छा network जो है वो develop हो जाता है, whether later on वो अच्छा चले या ना चले, but it is a good network. Then we have these mental health services. It's just not at the household, it's in the energy sector as well. We badly need to work on this mental health thing in the energy sector and in power sector everywhere, because we have to break down the traditional policy silos that only men can do this. It's not, I'm not being a feminist, but I'm just saying that we need to include women everywhere, and the comprehensive approach of addressing the complex issues in the energy policies as well, and advocacy of this women in inclusion, and for the managerial and energy transition. That's very important. One of my friends just mentioned that the confidence and the training should be given from the father and the male people at home, because that is the most important for the daughters specifically, because that's the most important social fabric for a woman to excel. And more or less, we were having a discussion for this toilet thing. In 1943, a NASA mathematician, she mentioned this toilet issue because there was an issue going on with the colored woman. That was back in 1943, she mentioned there, and it was addressed then and there, because there were no colored washrooms given at that time. They were just for the women only. That wasn't colored at that time. But we are still facing these issues, और हम उसी era के अंदर वापस जा रहे हैं कि हमें ये issues जो हैं वो बार-बार highlight करने पड़ रहे हैं. So winding up this thing, I would like to only add that we need to have the data that is required for the women inclusion, and the emphasis on the importance of the policies that will guarantee the women engagement and all the women representing in the energy industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have rightly pointed out that any policy will fail if it is produced in silos. We really need to include women in all types of platforms. Moving forward, I would request Mr. Aftab, as a development consultant working in urban areas, what strategies do you think are most effective in addressing the climate anxiety experienced by urban women? How can development programs incorporate mental health support while building climate resilience?
Thank you very much, Amna, and thank you very much all the panelists for very important points. It's a great learning being here. I would like to add that I think this also comes from Halima's point about the post and not getting the job. I think wherever there are different issues and there are different strategies to handle them. One of them is the mindset. And if we talk about gender, I think the basic problem in our society and society like ours is the mindset. Because if we want to change the mindset, then there is a different strategy to work on those areas. And the one component of strategy is to talk about it again and again and again, and bring men also in the discussions and see what are their challenges that they are facing, or their inability to understand and respond to those areas. I think this is a very gender insensitive panel that has responded to Halima, because as Dr. Shafkat also mentioned, that women face not double, but perhaps quadruple issues of stress, and they are managing them very well throughout their lives. And many examples we have seen in this room as well. And I think, just to give you an example, I was in Hajj many years back, and I was sitting with a fellow Haji who, after one ritual, came and he said that you are better placed because you are alone here. I'm with the family, and you know, women are weak, and that's why it took a longer time. And then just we started chatting that, do you think really women are weak? And he said yes. And then I gave him 2 or 3 examples that where women are much more stronger than men, including the delivery issues. And I said that if we men have to face that kind of challenge, perhaps we would never go for that. And he was convinced. But while sitting out of the table, he said that, हाँ, लेकिन आफ्ताब साहब फिर भी कभी ना कभी तो उनको डराना चाहिए ना. So I think that the mindset issue is the one which reflects in all our actions, in whether it's a job panel or our research, for example. And I would like to share that when we talk about research, I had the opportunity to witness at least 5 or 6 theses of a university, of 3 or 4 universities around Islamabad. Namal was not part of that. Very good studies, but none of them had a gender analysis. So I think this mindset it is very important to work on these areas, that how important is the impact between men and women and what kind of different strengths they bring and take us towards a better level. I think in terms of consultant, one challenge that I face whenever I do a lot of trainings, research and evaluations in Pakistan and abroad, one challenge I face that whenever I'm shared with some objectives of study or training, I always try to incorporate gender where it is absent. Sometimes people are sensitive and they incorporate, many times they are not sensitive. They said, ye itna masla nahi hai, main falan cheez pe chahiye, falan cheez pe chahiye. So I think it's very important to work continuously on these areas. And in terms of the urban areas, I think everywhere there is an anxiety, as mentioned by the panelists. I think it's very important to recognize the role of women, the strength of women. And that's why I think we can only move forward. And I hope this study and our actions that we are taking in our spheres can help. I just give one example that we can also take this initiative at our own level. During the COVID-19, I realized that I was under stress, but I was also seeing that the women in the family and girls in the family were also much more stressed when I have a discussion with them. And after that discussion, I contacted a psychologist and I said that would it be possible for having an online webinar with the girls? She said yes. So I asked all my girls in the family to contact their female friends, and we organized a webinar. And I was not part of that webinar purposefully, because I knew that women can handle the webinars. It's not an issue if they can organize one. So I think that helped a lot. They told me after the session that it helped us a lot. Plus, I also wanted to break the taboo of not consulting the psychologist or mental health as a taboo. So I think in various spheres, we can do our parts, but I think a collaborative effort would really help us to go faster.
Thank you so much. I think we all agree with the point you just mentioned, that a regular reinforcement of this idea needs to be continuously discussed among masses. I would now request Ms. Sidra Riaz. Climate anxiety is increasingly affecting young people, particularly young girls, who are concerned about their future in a climate-affected world. How do you think we can better support young women in urban areas who are experiencing climate anxiety? And what role can youth-led initiatives play in this effort?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amna, for posing a question which is very relevant to my work experience. I would start by talking about that by all the discussion, we are sure by now that climate anxiety is a very prevalent issue, especially among young women. But I would like to quote a study by Aga Khan University, which was conducted in 2023, which actually says that Pakistan's 65% of the Pakistan's youth, which is Pakistan, has a youth bulge. And among them, especially women, feel extremely vulnerable and extremely stressful by climate disasters and heat waves, etc. But the question is that either these impacts are only happening because of climate change or because of other certain things as well. If we look at the theory of climate anxiety, it actually says that there are certain indirect impacts as well. By that, they mean that the inaction of the government and the institutions also make the youth in Pakistan feel helpless, and it makes them feel more stressed towards climate change. While I was finding out a topic to do my PhD study, I wanted to do something for gender and climate change. And I came up with an idea to do a research on feminist climate justice and gender mainstreaming in Pakistan's policies. And I figured out that the international world started doing gender mainstreaming in their policies and gender analysis by 1970s. Until now in Pakistan, there is not a single policy in Pakistan which is doing gender mainstreaming. Not talking about only climate change or energy, any policy, workforce policy, employment policy, health policy, these gender mainstreaming aspects are not being considered in those policies. And gender mainstreaming is itself looking the policies and making the policies by incorporating the gender perspectives in it. Coming back to what happens in Pakistan, what I have seen since I started my activism through a youth-led initiative in 2022, what I saw that the issues like water, scarcity, food, and shelter are largely documented in many documents and areas in Pakistan, especially media as well. But the issues such as climate anxiety fails to make it to the larger forums and backgrounds, because I have been speaking on multiple forums since many years, but I was not even invited to one panel which was talking about climate anxiety. This is the first time. So this means that such sort of issues are not even considered an issue in Pakistan. That's how, from here, I'll start talking about the strategies. The first strategy I will talk about is that we have to start mental health support system in Pakistan. We need to start thinking that, yes, it is an issue. Anxiety is not if someone is worried, if someone is sad, that is not an anxiety. Anxiety itself is a very psychological phenomena which happens to people, and that has a physical impacts on their mental and on their physical health as well as on their mental health. So it's very important to see it in that perspective. So we need to start by starting a counseling services at school levels, university levels, and college levels. First of all, so the mental health support system. So people sitting in this room at least should consider, if somebody is coming to you talking about their anxiety, we need to consider that person in a state of psychological condition which needs to be addressed, instead of making fun of that person or considering, oh, you are just worried, it's okay, it will go away. Anxiety just doesn't go away like that. There needs to be a proper counseling services, and those services should be mainstreamed in the society. There should not be a taboo for either men or women to go to a counselor and seek counseling services. First point from my point of view. Second is, I always talk about that Pakistan is signatory to Paris Agreement, and Paris Agreement actually calls for inculcating climate education at all levels in Pakistan, in education levels. So we need to start inculcating education, climate education, from primary till the university level. Coming from a social sciences background, I assure everyone that social sciences could also teach climate education to their students. It's not just for environmental engineers. It's not just, most of the people sitting here, Amna comes from a public policy background, Zainab comes from a social sciences background, environment background, but people coming from different social sciences backgrounds can also study. I teach in a governance and public policy department, and we have incorporated topics such as climate governance and things like that. Second point I would like to talk about, we need to create safe spaces for people to talk. This is a safe space, we are talking about it. You go outside, you won't find a safe space to talk about it. So at every level, even in offices, there should be a safe space for women to talk about their anxieties, their depressions, and climate anxieties they are facing. Another thing I think we need to empower women at the leadership positions and advocacy. We are basically done with working under women, under men, bosses. Women need to go up to the leadership positions, and they can handle the pressures. Like Miss Halima was rejected for a job just because of the fact that she could not take up the pressure from the energy sector. We need to stop this mentality and take the women to the leadership positions. And I am very happy, since last 2 governments, we are having women ministers of climate change. So this is really nice. Coming towards what youth-led initiatives could do. I led a youth-led initiative, and what I have figured out since so far is that one thing which makes the youth empowered is their sense of agency. When they feel that their efforts are getting out tangible effects. Like if anybody sitting over here from youth, if I will give you a chance to sit here and speak about it, you will feel very empowered. because you would feel, oh, my talk is making some difference. So it's very important to involve youth. Like SDPI has started summer internship programs. I believe even development agencies could start internship programs for students so that they could feel that their efforts are getting into a tangible effects. Last few points is that we need to start looking at these issues by the intersectional approach. Age, gender, color, your socioeconomic background impacts your anxiety and your psychological condition. So we need to see these lenses. So I'll give one suggestion as well. Like, yeah, for the report you are making, you could look at through the intersectional sort of, because feminist climate justice itself is a larger domain to talk about. We talk about climate justice on many forums, but I have never heard people talking about feminist climate justice. But this thing has been talked in the international world and developed countries. That's why their policies are extremely gender mainstream. In the end, I would like to say that in the era where climate change is actually shaping our future, it is very important to let the young women lead the climate initiatives. And it is not just necessary, rather it is imperative and a right moment to start working on it. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sidra, for your points. You have rightly mentioned about the intersectional approach to this study, which we will be definitely considering in the future. I would now request Mr. Shershaw. Mr. Shershaw, as someone who educates and trains communities on climate issues, how do you address the psychological impact of climate anxiety in your work? What tools or practices do you recommend for helping urban women to cope with the stress and anxiety linked to climate change?
Yes, thank you so much. So it's been an enlightening session so far. I'll also include my 2 cents. So based on my experience of maybe training more than 10,000 youth across the Asia Pacific region, talking about climate and general sustainability issues, I do find this, and I will continue with what Sidra mentioned, that even us as change makers, we also face the eco anxiety. So some of my first experiences with this was when I was the UNDP Movers Program envoy, and they introduced a very good workshop. It was called Well-being for Change Makers. Because we as change makers, just like Jaya explained, right? She felt the anxiety, we feel the anxiety, we all feel the anxiety. So this would be the first thing. If we are feeling the anxiety, we're going to transfer it to the others we are training. So the first thing is all the change makers, they need to work on their own well-being. And then that workshop is really good. We can massively even disseminate it. The content is there. It's freely available. Anyone can collaborate. It's a 2-hour workshop. And it has some very nice tools. Some of them you also talked about, like say talking to a friend and so on, having a life wheel where you're doing good, where you're not doing good, and so on. Those steps are there. So that's one part of what I do. The second is my own platform, Skillistan. And so we have made these separate modules for all the SDGs. And recently we also combined a nexus of SDG 3 and 13. Where we could also talk about health, and especially the mental health that is linked to climate action. So that's also available for greater dissemination. Then comes my role as an LCOI country contact point. So what we are doing this year, because we are having so many LCOIs at the provincial level, so we have the chance to do a lot of activities. And one of them we did in LCOI Punjab too, along with a youth-led partner. That was about mental health in climate conversation. And the youth-led partner who was also a woman, so they have a new initiative, and I'm one of the board members over there as well. It's called Medical Students for Climate Action, which I like a lot because the thing was, their first idea was to include climate into the medical curriculum, which is very important because they said that usually we are the first responders as medical ecosystem in every disaster. And even when we're talking about general psychology issues, who would you go to? A medical practitioner, definitely. And they don't know about climate. There's nothing about them about climate in their curriculum. This is one way. It will take a long time because putting something into PMDC, curriculum, it's a big job. But we have a good team for it, and we are working on it. And how to also integrate mental health into that curriculum apart from general climate education. Next, just to summarize some tools. I would say we need more such conversations where we can brainstorm more innovative ways of how to increase awareness about climate issues and how to tackle them, especially targeting women. And then including more and more women, as we are doing through our LCOIs and many other initiatives, including more and more women in these climate spaces, whether they are online, whether they are offline. And I would just end with this, that, I know men are dominating all the spaces, including the climate space, but I'm really proud. And when I see women like you, Zainab, like you, Jaya, like you, Sidra, and all our colleagues who are leading this debate, and sometimes they even outshine the men in these spaces. So I would just ask the men, collectively, we can do more along with half the sky. You cannot leave half the sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much for enlightening us with the first line of defense, that is our medical practitioners, and how they are technically unaware of the whole climate change scenario and how this subject is not included in their syllabus. I would now request Ms. Jaya to kindly tell us about how climate anxiety intersects with issues of social justice and human rights, particularly for marginalized urban women. How do you perceive the connection between human rights advocacy and addressing the mental health challenges posed by climate anxiety? What more needs to be done, basically, to protect vulnerable women in this context?
Thank you so very much, Amna. Just to respond to the first part, maybe Sidra mentioned that currently, since I'm serving as a master facilitator with British Council, and they have this project for 3 years where they aim to train around 90,000 young people. You might have heard about this Spiley project, where they have engaged universities with the HEC and also engaged communities. And in this entire curriculum that is solely made from the people of Pakistan, by the people of Pakistan, with the people of Pakistan, they have this entire chapter on eco-anxiety. So probably through this also, the discussion that we are having, at least to this project, I would say at least 90,000 young people, and then the people they would be approaching directly, indirectly, this discourse would be at least starting in upcoming years, or maybe in these 3 years. Since I understand urban women have their own identities, rural women have their own identities, some intersect, some we need to keep distinct as well. And particularly, we do use the term, I've stopped using it, the development practitioner, because now I take development, from a very different angle, because from us, development comes with big buildings. And then we also need to understand that how people probably who are not living in big buildings, if they have access to resources and opportunities, are the resources does only mean the luxurious life. So maybe this is an ideological conflict within the sector as well and within myself. But I understand that since we have in our urban settings, we have these big buildings and most of them retain heat, and then how they put them into more vulnerability than maybe those women who do not have at least such a heating system. I think one important thing that we need to understand, even the people who are into this discourse, is that we need to start thinking from a perspective that women are not emotionally weak. Women are not biologically weak. जब हम इमोशनली वीक कहते हैं, इसका मतलब ये है कि दैट फॉर एग्जांपल हैविंग हलीमा इनटू द सिस्टम, हमें उसके लिए रिसोर्सेज ज्यादा लगाने पड़ेंगे. एंड इवन इफ आई लुक फ्रॉम एट माई सेल्फ फ्रॉम एन एम्प्लॉयर पर्सपेक्टिव, आई डोंट वांट टू पुट एक्स्ट्रा resources just to bring one person in and जब मुझे कोई और मिला. तो I think from economic perspective it's very rational. मैं अगर employer होंगी, I'll not hire someone जिसके लिए मुझे extra effort लगानी पड़ेगी. So maybe when we mention these कि women emotionally weak हैं या biologically weak हैं, तो वो reinforce होना शुरू हो जाता है. And everyone else who believes कि अच्छा अब इनको काम कराने के लिए, इनको इस mainstream कराने के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा और effort करनी पड़ेगी, so जो existing resources उनको ही ले लें. We can maybe mention biologically different, but then I also believe कि जब हम biologically different कहते हैं, then we say biologically different from men, तो it means कि हमारा जो standard है, that's men. So आपने फिर men को standard बना दिया और आपने औरतों को कहा कि वो different है, rather the standard is not men. So, and again, we need to understand, since I'm a feminist, we do not say it's about men and women, it's about each other and equality of both of these genders. we not talk about कि it's a pie, कि अच्छा आपने औरतों को ज़्यादा चीज़ दे दी तो मर्दों को कम मिलेगी, ऐसा नहीं है. It's about the equal distribution of all the resources. We do talk about feminist, gender just climate actions, but then maybe Pakistani context में since feminism is quite understood and it's a highly religiously and patriarchal society, so हमें अपने local conversations, local terminologies, maybe examples from the religion, examples from the culture, we need to bring those into conversations. We don't only have to, maybe we can have that a sense into it, but जो terminologies हैं, ये जो तरीकाकार है, जो maybe culturally appropriate है, वो अपनाया जा सकता है. If I particularly talk about a few things, number one, funding. Funding ecosystem needs to be improved, particularly around addressing climate anxiety. Also, ensuring accountability, monitoring, and evaluation. Most of the time when we are sitting in such spaces, there is a strong narrative that funding spaces are shrinking. We do not have funds, we do not have money, but every other time as an activist, I see resources being wasted. इतना पैसा, इतने रिसोर्सेज, इतना ह्यूमन रिसोर्स, इतना फाइनेंशियल रिसोर्स, इतना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जाया होता जा रहा है एंड वी आर अनएबल टू मैनेज इट. इतना इनएफिशिएंट उसकी मैनेजमेंट, इतनी मिसमैनेजमेंट, आई थिंक दैट कुड बी इम्प्रूव. जो एग्जिस्टिंग हमारे पास रिसोर्सेज हैं, until unless we try okay how to gather more, we have seen in earlier disasters as well how that could be improved. Also, maybe funding youth-led, women-led organizations from the communities as well, rather than someone coming out, going from one city to another. जो वहाँ के जो लोग हैं, जो for example displaced हो रहे हैं, migrants हैं, refugees हैं, IDPs हैं, they could lead so that that's sustainable as well, and they also are aware. Also, we need to understand that has already mentioned that referral mechanism and support systems. हमारे पास पहली बात जो एग्जिस्टिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी मौजूद है. या फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मैं सिर्फ फैमिली प्लानिंग की सर्विसेज ही बात कर लूं, देयर आर क्लिनिक्स इन सर्टेन एरियाज, बट जब वहां पे लास्ट ईयर फ्लड आया, पीपल वर ऑलरेडी नॉट अवेयर ऑफ कि ये क्लिनिक्स बने हुए हैं. अगर बने हुए भी हैं और अगर वहां पे वो डॉक्टर्स हमें वो सर्विसेज नहीं देते, तो वी एज ह्यूमन हमारे पास राइट है कि हमारे पास ये लीगल चैनल्स हैं, ये ह्यूमन राइट्स हैं. सो मे बी दैट अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ दिस इज माई राइट एंड दिस इज माई रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लैक्स बिहाइंड. And then we also need to introduce mental health and well-being mechanisms at all levels. वो community engagement से भी होंगे, वो regional level पे, national पे भी होंगे, वो policy making तक भी जाएंगे. And ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि we put just one documentation and then again implementation is the biggest issue. Just maybe quoting an example, last time when we had flood, and अब तो दोबारा ये शुरू हो गया, मैं सुबह ही न्यूज़ सुन रही थी तो मुझे समझ नहीं आता कि जो पिछले हैं उसके ऊपर अभी हम डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं, या we need to see how to manage this disaster now, rather strong, I would say, human rights violations. But last time when we were going to the communities, तो थोड़ा कोशिश की हमने उनको philanthropic humanitarian relief for support provide करने की. We realized that a lot of them obviously were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So what we did was we went to those communities and we started doing theaters over there, engaging young people, young kids, और हमने उनके साथ थिएटर किया, उनको एंगेज किया स्टोरी टेलिंग की. एंड दैट्स हाउ वो जो ट्रॉमा जो वो बच्चों से गुजर रहे थे, उनके स्कूल्स बंद हो गए, एंड वी कुड सी अ चेंज कि कैसे वो कम्युनिटीज, द किड्स वर नॉट कॉन्फिडेंट इनफ, दे वर सो मच अफ्रेड, नॉट इवन करेजियस टू स्टे इनटू दैट स्पेस. बट जब हमने वो आर्ट एज अ टूल यूज किया, वी आस्क्ड देम टू ड्रॉ हाउ दे आर फीलिंग, we did theaters with them, storytelling. So वो जब थिएटर के थ्रू आप खासकर आप दिखाते हैं और फिर थिएटर के थ्रू आप जेंडर के ऊपर बात करते हैं. मैं वैसे जाके बात करूंगी कि जेंडर मेन स्ट्रीमिंग हो तो लोगों को लगता है कि शायद आप कुछ ऐसे हकूक की बात कर रहे हैं जो रिलीजियसली कल्चरली नहीं है, बट वही चीज जब थिएटर के थ्रू जाती है, यू आस्क देम क्या समझ आई, एंड दे से कि ओ ये तो मैं ही थी जो घर में खाना बना रही थी और बीमार हुई, तो मियाँ को भी पता नहीं चला. सो आई थिंक द कन्वर्सेशन इज व्हेन ड्रिवन बाय द कम्युनिटीज, व्हेन पीपल रादर देन मी गोइंग एंड टेलिंग देम आपको जिंदगी में ये करना चाहिए, दैट वैल्यूज अ लॉट. एंड लास्ट थिंग, आई थिंक कनेक्टिंग all of these dots to economics. अगर हम ये कहें कि औरतों को तालीम इसलिए हासिल करनी चाहिए because they should, it's a human right, they're humans, it might not be understood. बट अगर हम ये कहें कि औरतों को तालीम इसलिए हासिल करनी चाहिए क्योंकि कल वो जीडीपी में कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगी, that's more understood. So maybe because we need to understand that the world is not fair, the world is not just, everything revolves around your economic contribution to the country, to the people, not as a human. So if we connect these vulnerabilities to the economics, to the monetary benefit, or maybe the monetary loss, or even the monetary anxiety, particularly in current economic context of Pakistan, this will make more sense, not only to the people, but actually the politicians, the policymakers who are there to serve, and maybe probably fail to do that. Over to you, Amna.
Thank you so much for such a detailed grassroots level analysis of the entire discussion. I would now thank to all the participants, to all the panelists sitting with us today. Your discussion we had today is going to make us understand this concept more clearly, and we would be looking forward to collaborate with you further for this study. Once again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for coming.
So for the group photo, if we can,
Yeah.
if you can join us here.